All right, an introduction to petroleum fuel facilities, bulk fuel storage, JPGUAR, PERA. Contents, introduction, general requirements, 3 receiving facilities, 4 dispensing facilities, 5 piping system, 6 equipment description, 7 controls, 8 canopies, 9 product recovery systems, 10 fuel additives. This publication is adapted from United Facility Criteria. United States government with public domain has authorized unlimited distribution and are not copyrighted. Alright, introduction. This discussion provided with the guidance of the design of the bulk fuel storage, including bulk storage tanks. Those components normally located with a typical bulk storage compound. Components include pre-piping line, receiving facilities, tank, truck, tanker car, receiving facilities, pipeline, dispensing, pumping facilities, tanker truck, tanker car, loading facilities, all related piping equipment. No aviation fuel could be pumped directly from a tank into aviation fuel can be pumped directly from a tank into an aircraft. The aircraft direct fueling system or refueler treat the tank as an operating storage tank, regardless of the size of the location, must meet the applicable requirements of aviation turbine fuel operation tanks. Exempt of bulk storage tanks are configured in with fuel refuelers on emergency basis only. 2. General requirement. The general design information fuel facilities is provided elsewhere. Do not begin to design any fuel systems without first being completely familiar with the general design information. Alright, 3. Receiving facilities. Fuel is normally received at a bulk fuel storage facility by pipeline, tanker truck, tanker car, barge, ship. In many cases, the fuel is pumped by a pipeline with a marine receiving facility with a bulk storage facility. 3.1 Pipeline receiving facility. General criteria. Petroleum fuels may be supplied with a bulk fuel storage tank in intermittent pipelines, which may be dedicated to serving a particular facility that may be commercial pipelines having a number of types of grades of the fuel or more than one user. In some cases, the pipeline will be an installation pipeline. Its different fuel types are used separate. Each type of the receiving facility exercise extreme care to avoid a design system that could create a damaging surge of pipeline created with a quick closing valve. 3.1.2 Equipment required. Provide pressure regulating diaphragm control valve to reduce the pipeline pressure to the design pressure for the facility. Piping equipment to provide manual isolation valve at the bottom of the upstream and downstream. Each the diaphragm control valve. For this design, any of the feature system which may be defective with flow of the pipeline contact with operator with pipeline insertion for the current operating conditions. Evaluate the diaphragm control valve. Conduct a surge analysis of the pipeline. Determine whether the use of the diaphragm control valve is appropriate. B. Provide a meter with a receiving on the line. Measure quantities of fuel received with the turbine type of the meter for the commonly used with the pipeline receipt. However, the positive displacement meters are acceptable if available. The required flow rate. Consider all use of the alternative meter technologies, ultrasonic meters. Compensate fuel temperature at the point of custody transfer. Provide a basket strain over the upper stream side of the meter connection with providing with a meter with a portable powered meter prover connection consists of the manual isolation valve in the main pipeline with a T on both the upper stream and the downstream side of the valve. The branch each of the T's has a manual isolation valve and a hose connection. The master meter can be attached to a hose connection. C. Provide a means of sampling each pipeline provided product at a breakthrough manifold. D. Provide provision for the contractor bolt pig launchers receiving the system with arranging a pig receiving the connection to avoid introducing pipeline sludge and sediments into the tank. Pig launching receive the provision required for intermittent cross-country installation described in Chapter 6 of the UFC underground pipelines. Provide an interface tank with the receive the mixed fuels with the beginning and an end of the shipment unless the commercial pipeline company can provide their service satisfactory. F. Provide a breakout tank if only if the pipeline can be flowed for them cannot be stopped due to the pipeline operational requirement. Provide valve to divert the flow of fuel from the pipeline to the breakout tank. Every fuel transfer blocked as by a manual automatic valve. The fuel facility system, such as the fuel facility system, would be overpressurized with a transient surge, high pressure to that ending piping supply pump with the appropriate breakout takeover alarms. Alarm breakouts over the fuel facility operative to take the necessary step within the stop of the pipeline flow. Provide means for the transferring fuel out of the breakout tank of the back to the fuel system after the breakout event with the duct zero through the pipeline operator performing the transit surge analysis to determine with the surge Surge pressure reduction methods are required to avoid damage to the pipeline. G. Provide means with inbound infiltration of all products with selection and filtration depends on the anticipated impurity, source of fuel, with the shifting methods considered with the micron filters, cyclone filters, HAPAC calipers. Has passable filtration devices. Avoid use of water slug shut-off diaphragm control valves other than rapid closing on the pipeline receipt facilities. Provide manual isolation valves to isolate the equipment over the service. Provide basket strains upstream and meters of upstream of the pumps and meters with receipt filtration. Provide thermal relief valves around the isolation check valves to receive the excessive pressure caused by thermal expansion liquid trap between the shutoff points. See figures 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Provide a concrete housekeeping pad unless otherwise directed with a canopy to protect the fixed facility access of the assets and equipment from the elements. 3.2 Tank truck, tanker car offloading, tanker truck and tank car offloading facilities. 3.2.1 General criteria: bulk fuel storage may be supplied with fuel by tank truck, tank car, or both. Facility with a pipeline water transport as the principal supply source of the provided tank truck, tanker car delivery. Secondary supply of the source of the tank truck delivery is the most common method. However, the special transportation consideration changing circumstances. You may make the use of the rail facility desirable. Therefore, an activity railroad surface with a range of the tanker truck receiving the facility so that the system can be easily economically extended with the existing rail spur. See Figure 5. A preferred offloading method is into the drop tank of the offloading system. See Figure 6. B. Provide package offloading system with a drop tank over the offloading is not practical offloading tanker trucks due to the environmental concerns, site limitations, cost consideration, and or direct by the owner. See Figure 7. Provide direct offloading system when only an occasional tanker truck requires offloading when directed to the owner. See Figure 8. Do not locate tanker truck or tanker car receiving facilities closer than 50 feet from building, roads, overhead power lines, pad mounted transfers, property lines, or 25 feet from fuel farm fence. Provide adequate number of minimum 2 of position offload daily fuel requirement facility with an 8-hour period without causing detention, demurrage, delivery of conveyancy. Alright, provide separate offloading connections for each of the type of the fuel to be handled with the facility. Use the tank truck with multiple independent compartments. Provide a hose with manifold, minimum 2 connections per tank truck with a manifold with the hose connections equal to the number of the truck compartments recommended for quick turnaround. If less than 5 connections are provided, provide a blind flange on the end of the manifold to accommodate the additional connections. Provide a contaminant area to each of the truck offloading positions concerning an impermeable retention control with a drainage system leading to the control remote spill contaminant system. Pave the contaminant area consisting of the island, the spaces between the islands on each side of the outer island with a concrete pitch with a minimum of 1% toward each catch basin and trench drains. Design of the containment area in accordance with the federal, state, and local regulations. Do not use asphalt within the spill containment area. The maximum slope of any paving with a truck movement or packaging area should not exceed 2% except for the rollover curbs. Rollover curb is provided some of the vertical entrance with exit grades, which shall not exceed 8% of the rollover curb. That shall be aligned perpendicularly with the direction of the truck. Movement designer shall assure that the adequate ground clearance is achieved for all vehicles utilizing contaminated areas. H. A tanker car offloading area paved with a contaminant area with a concrete, otherwise provided with a contaminant. For the other extending 5 feet outside of the outer rail, extending longitudinally 15 feet away from the center of each loading position, sloped and paved area to spill contaminant system as described previously. Provide control concrete remote spill contaminate system for each contaminated area. Design remote spill contaminant system in accordance with federal, state, local regulations. Provide remote spill containment system with capacity greater than the volume of the largest tank truck or tanker car compartment to be offloaded. Curb truck position may be provided in addition to the remote system. 25% or more of the total required contaminant volume must be directed and stored at the remote system before the shared contaminant volume will pound at the truck within the standing area. Provide local lockable eccentric plug valve and indicator position post located outside of the contaminator location that will be accessible during fire. The valve should be lockable and normally closed with allowable to contaminate during the fuel operations, which should be opened with a drain with the air with the necessary. Tanker truck can be also used as large as 10,000 gallons of capacity, and tanker cars as large as 40,000 gallons. If the canopy is installed, reduce the size of the rainfall, accounting for the wind blow, rain, combine the Consider combining the remote spill contaminant system with the other spill contaminant system on site except for the tank contaminant system. However, take the level of contamination of contaminated air into the consideration. J. Construct a draining pipe between the contaminated air with a concrete remote spill contamination system between the remote spill contaminant system, lockable plug valve, petroleum resistant, fire resistant, and permeable materials. Do not use clay, concrete, fiberglass, or plastic piping materials. For offloading trucks, tank trucks, arrange flow of the traffic to permit continuous forward movement of the tank trucks at all times. Commercial tank truck offloading on the passenger side to determine the number of concurrents and need of the offloading tanker cars. Consult the owner consider the minimized tanking car movements for the tank car shipping schedule, the conveyancy turnaround times, locking rail switching capabilities, and quantity of fuel needed for the 1 day's fuel supply, and provide electrical design that meets the requirements of the National Fire Protection Association 77 and 780. Treat combustible liquids under pressure as flammable liquid. Provide a canopy protection for the elements, fixed facility assets, and equipment. Provide a canopy to preclude the rain from the containment area when the requirements of the discussion are not met. Provide egress entrance for the emergency response vehicle. The egress and entrance routes need to be large enough to allow both trucks and emergency vehicles leaving and entering the facility. Provide mean of an inbound filterization. All product selection filterization depends on anticipated impurity, source of fuel, and shipping method. Consider the use of micron filters, cyclonic filters, and hayback coalescers as possible filtration design. Alright, tank truck and tanker car drop tank offloading system. The introduction of the air fuel receiving system posed extremely hazard with which could result with a fire or explosion. Hazard for the compound with the air fuel mixture is passed through the receipt filter separator where static electricity generated ignition can occur. During offloading facilities, air is introduced into the system for the facility with the capability to offload several tank trucks at once, where new tanker trucks with multiple hoses are connected to multiple isolated compartments. Consider for the providing underground gravity type, the receiving the tank with a submersible transfer pump, and leaving control for smaller systems, 1 to 2 tank trucks. Consider a low profile above ground receiving the tank with a central centrifugal transfer pump for either case, provided with lesser level sensors to control the flow for the temperature compensated meter on the receipt line with the tanks point with the transfer and the custody for the materials of the construction. Offloading drop tanks refer to Chapter 8, see Figure 6. Alright, 323, tank truck, tanker car package offloading system. For tank of the truck and tanker car offloading drop tank may be particularly due to environmental concerns, site limitation, cost consideration. In this instance, provide 600 gallon per minute package offloading system. Provide one package and system, including vertical line, inline, centrifugal pump, diaphragm control valves to control the flow of the meter, multiple hose lines, connections, 1 each for the tanker truck compartment, 4 each tanker truck of the tanker car receiving station. Provide an eliminator tank to remove the from system, reducing of the air fuel mixture passing through the receiver, the filter separator, preventing meter of the air and less sensors in the air eliminator take control of the moment discharge diaphragm control valve, modulate flow rate based on the level of the air eliminator tank. Refer to in Figure 7. Tanker truck and tanker car direct offloading system when used when only occasional tanker truck requires offloading and when directed by the owner. Refer Figure 8. R325 equipment required when tanker trucks and tanker cars are offloaded with a drop tank offloading system. Do not provide an offloading pump. Provide at least 2 pumps for the drop tank with a transfer fuel for the storage tank. When tanker trucks or tanker cars are offloaded with a package offloading system, provide one system with each of the tanker truck, tanker car that is to offload simultaneously at the average capacity of 600 gallons per minute. The number of the system shall be determined by the owner shall have the minimum of 2 capacity systems will reduce to 300 gallon per minute, so each of the only when directed by the owner. When tanker trucks or tanker trucks or tanker cars are offloaded with a direct offloading system, provide a central fuel pump figure with a provide automatic air elimination shown in Figure 8. Provide at least 2 pumps allowed with the continued operation is one over the out service. The capacity of the pumps may be increased to 600 gallon per minute only with a directed by the owner. The central line height of suction line is manifold. The pump should not exceed 23 and a quarter inch above the truck loading park position. Locate with the pump as close as possible to the offloading point to prevent suction problems. Provide a 4-inch diameter of 10-foot long, lightweight, reinforced vacuum-rated offloading hose covered housing, covered house storage track with each of the hose connection, each of the loading position, eliminating covered for the hose storage rack. If unloading, the rack is covered with a canopy. Ensure all swivels are non-lubricated aluminum, stainless steel inline repairable type. Consult with the activities verified with the need of the hose, since some of the location the hauling contractor provides the hose. Each equipment with the tanker truck over the offloading position electronically, intrinsically safe for the automatic self-monitoring ground verification. Unit lockable bypass for the grounding. If not verified that there is offloading pump dedicated to the position. Ensure that the unit prevents the pumping from starting. The pump is not dedicated. Ensure that the alarms are sure sounds if the offloading valve is open with the ground verification included with a separate grounding wheel to accommodate the vehicles without grounding equipment. Provide emergency fuel shutoff push button station from the tank offloading with the multiple position. The emergency fuel shutoff button station is required for each position along the route. Personal egress between 100 and 200 feet from the offload position. Designed in such a manner that the activation of the emergency stop will shut off all fueling offloading area and associated pump house and pump pad. Provide fuel sampling connections at each of the position with a provided line connecting the test samples. Provide pressure gauges on both sides with each of the strainer, different type of gauge across each strainer with the strainer upstream of the pump suction gauge may function strainer downstream gauge. I provide a compound pressure vacuum gauge on the inlet side of the pumps and pressure gauge on the outside of the pumps. Alright, if the system is JP5 other the fuel does not have static dissipator additive that provides conductivity level greater than 50 conductive units, 30-second retention time is not provided between the filter and separator. Receiving tank, provide relaxation tank downstream filter separator to ensure the combined 30-second retention time to in the relaxation of the tank and the time in the piping. Provide a basket strainer upstream in the meters and pumps and receipt filtration. Provide combination flow controlled non-surge check diaphragm control valve on all floating pumps, except positive displacement types, and all bulk eliminator with the automatic air release head is included. Provide means of closing of the diaphragm control valve with a solenoid pilot. Provide a positive displacement turbine meter proving connections. Provide meter with a temperature compensation capability whether the custody transfer occurs. Provide a basket train with the upstream side of the meter. On each of the loading connection with the offloading riser of the install visual fuel flow indicator maximum of 275 psi at 100 degrees Fahrenheit with the Viton seal with a maximum temperature rating of 300 degrees Fahrenheit will allow the visual quality assurance provided with the operator with a backup system to shut off the pumps and offloading is complete to prevent air buildup in the receiver lines. O. Provide manual isolation valve to isolate the equipment of the service. P. Provide thermal relief around isolation check valve to relieve the excessive pressure caused by thermal expansion of liquid trapped by shut-off points in C. Figures 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4. Dispensing facilities. Fuels normally dispensed with bulk fuel via the installation pipeline, terminal pipeline, tanker truck, and tanker car. General pipeline pumping facilities. General criteria. As discussed elsewhere, pipelines are intermittently piped on installation pipeline. Installation pipelines are commonly used for the transfer of fuel for the aircraft fuel facility or marine dispensing facility. Intermittent pipelines are cross-country between installations. However, since pipelines pumping facilities are typically with a bulk fuel storage facility, they are covered in this discussion. Equipment required. Central fecal pump complying with the API standard 610. With adequate head capacity, always provide with one additional pump as backup. The burn positive displacement meter with approving the connection consideration can also be given the alternative meter technology, such as ultrasonic meter to compensate with the fuel temperature as custody transfer point. Provide fuel sample the connections, the collecting testing sample. Pig launch receive capability. Intermittent installation pipeline strain on the upstream side of the meters and pump made. Double the block of the marine isolation valve with the total isolation required. Pressure gauge on both sides of the strainer, differential pressure type gauge across the strainer. Compound pressure vacuum gauge on the inlet side of the pump and the pressure gauge outlet side of the pump. Provide combination flow across the non-surge check with the diaphragm control valve. All pumps except positive displacement type of the bulk air eliminator with the automatic air release head included. Provides a means of closing the diaphragm control valve with a solenoid pilot. Provide a minimal manual isolation valve to isolate the equipment from service. Provide a thermal relief valve with an isolation check valve to receive excessive pressure check with a thermal expansion liquid trap between shutoff points of figure 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Provide concrete housing cab keeping pad unless otherwise directed by owner of a canopy protected facility. Fixed facilities, assets, equipment from the elements. Our tanker truck and tanker car loading facility general. The discussion applied with the facilities required for the loading, overloading of the road tank of the truck. The rail tanker car is used in the bulk transfer of fuel. The typical application transfer the tanker truck with the storage terminal secondary to the storage, such as filing filling station, a heating plant. It may become many cases of the receiving and loading of the facilities are combined. In case of both the receiving and loading facility, requirements must be addressed. The chapter does include facilities loading of the aviation fuel for the direct use of an industry of the aircraft. This process requires special design consideration. See figure 6 and 8. Determine volume, fuel, number of the tank trucks and the tanker cars to be handled, and operating an analysis of the assistance of the owner. Do not locate with the tanker truck with the tanker car or loading facility with closer than minimum 50 feet from the building's overhead, red power lines, roads, pad mounted transformer, property lines, 25 feet from the fuel farm. Fence. Do not locate the tanker truck for loading facility closer than 100 feet from a railroad track or spur or rail siding from the offloading for loading and offloading. See Chapter 8 with the UFC clearance requirements for the tanks. Bottom loading is only acceptable method of loading a tanker truck with the bottom loading, and the result of the increase of the safety, manpower, of the quality control product with the air, with the cleanliness of the non-U.S. location, where only contracted top-loading tank trucks are available to install with the top-loading rack with the permission owner of the event with a provided future bottom loading capability. Provide contaminated area. Each truck with a loading position consisting of an impermeable retention control drainage system leading with the control remote spill control system with paved with the contaminated air consisting of the islands with the space between the islands on each side of the outer island, which concrete pitch at a minimum of 1% toward the catch basin and the trench drains. Design contaminant areas and code federal. Design the contaminant areas in accordance with federal, state, and local regulations. Do not use asphalt within the spill contaminated area. Maximum slope of the paving the truck movement over the packaging shall not exceed 2%. Expect accepting roll over curbs. The roll over curb provided with some of the vertical entrance with exit grades shall not exceed 8% of the roll over the curb. Shall be aligned with the perpendicular with the direction of the truck movement. Design should assure the adequate ground clearance of the achieve that all vehicle will be utilized in contaminated areas. A tanker car loading areas paved with contaminated air can pave with the contaminated area with concrete, otherwise provide contaminant. For the area extending 5 feet outside of the outer rail, extend longitudinal 15 feet away from the center of each loading position. Slope paved area to spill contaminated air system are described previously in item D. Provide control remote spill contaminant system. Each of the contaminated areas design remote spill contaminant system according with the federal, state, local law regulations. The remote spill contaminant system with greater capacity greater than the volume of the largest tank truck of the tanker compartment to be offloaded. A curb tank truck position provided with addition of the remote system. 25% of the more of the total required contaminant volume must be directed to and stored at the remote system before the shared contaminant volume will upon a truck stand area. Provide a lockable eccentric plug valve indicator post located outside of the contaminant area of location 1 with visible be safely accessible during fire. The valve shall be lockable, normally closed, to lock contaminant during the fueling operation, which can only open and drain with whenever necessary. Tanker car can also be larger than that. Tank trucks can be as large as 10,000 gallons of capacity. Tanker cars as large as 40,000 gallons. If the companion install reduced sizing on the rail rainfall, accounting for the wind-blown rail, consider the combined remote spill contaminant system, while the other spill contaminant sites not except for the tank contaminant system. However, take the level of the contaminant in each contaminated area into consideration. Construct with a drain pipe between the contaminated air with the concrete remote spill remaining contaminant system between the remote spill contaminant system lockable with eccentric plug valve with the petroleum resistant, fire resistant, and permeable materials. Use clay, concrete, fiberglass, or plastic piping materials. Provide a canopy with the production of the elements of the facility assets and equipment. Provide a canopy to preclude rain from contaminated air which directed from the owner. Provide separate piping pumps and loading connection controls for each different type of the grade of fuel. Okay, arrange the load racking with a row island sufficient clearance between the allow easy access for the all parts of the tank truck with the park and arrange islands approach with the man with the forward motion. All tank trucks are at all times are ample room with the turning. Place and arrange bottom loading island to accommodate one tanker truck only with the side adjacent to the tanker truck's liquid connections, usually the passenger side. With the tanker truck provide entrance to the egress of the emergency vehicles. Alright, and if the top of the loading is required with the tanker cars normally owned with a commercial contract, leave no other choice. Approved by the owner, provide a typical tank car loading with a rack with a elevated steel platform consisting of the walkway of 4 feet wide, 10 foot and 10.5 feet above the top of the rails, full length of 6 tank cars. Ensure that the center line of the structure is 10.5 feet above the center line of the trucks. center line 10.5 feet above the center line of the tracks. Equipment of the platform counterweighted spring-loaded tilting bridge to connect tanker car dome to each loading station, designed so the release from the horizontal position bridge will automatically move and lock in the upright position away from any part of the tanker car under weather conditions, ensure conformance with the appropriate requirements. 422 tank truck fill stand equipment required. Provide a positive displacement turbine meter each tank of the truck fill connection. Provide each meter with the upstream basket strainer, including the temperature compensation if the brackets to be at a point of custody. Transfer. Provide fuel sample connection with the collecting temp samples. Provide pressure gauge on both sides of the strainer with the differential pressure type of across the strainer. Provide fusible link butterfly isolation valves at first piece of the equipment and in the direction of the flow loading position. Makes provisions start-stop pumps with a start and stop pump controls at each position, included pump status indicator light on the control box. Provides solenoid operated truck loading diaphragm control valve with the opening and closing speed control pressure regulating check and solenoid shut-off features, and interlock the solenoid with the electronic high-level shut-off of the ground verification control system. G. Provide each fill position with electronic high-level shut-off with electric grounding verification, electronic or hydraulic deadman control system. The system shall be intrinsically safe with the self-checking with the interlocking system with the solenoid with the operating with the truck loading diaphragm control valve, pump such of the valve that cannot remain open, but pump cannot operate if the tank compartment is full. The tank truck is not grounded with the other deadman is released. Ensure the system is compatible with both electronic fiber optic sensors with manual key bypass may require parallel effort beyond project scope to ensure that all tracks of the facility having a compatible connection. Facility trucks that do not have fixed probable use cane probes instead. Provide emergency fuel shutoff button stations. Fill stand with a multiple position emergency fuel shutoff push button stations are required each of the position along with the routes of the personal ingress egress between 100 to 200 feet from the fill stand. Designed in such a manner with the activation emergency stop will shut off the fueling at the pump house and the pump pad. Equipment liquid connection tanker truck for the bottom loading the dry brake couplers in accordance with the API recommended practice 1004. For appropriate guidelines on vapor collection, recovery disposal point system, provide a heater insulate with the heated pipes as required with the Vikas fuels and to be low with the maintained temperature of the fuel. Minimum pumping temperature provides stainless steel loading arm pantograph without hoses equipped with a non-lubricated swivel that may be used instead of the hosing approved by the owner. If approved by the owner, ensure all swivel is non-lubricated stainless steel of an inliner repairable type. Provide meter providing approving connections as described unless the local procedure provides alternative. Place provide a relaxation tank with a piping configuration sufficient capacity to retain maximum flow of the loading station for 30 seconds from the time of the fuel leaves and last piece of the filtration equipment. Fuel reaching the load of the nozzle applies only to the JP5 and other fuels which do not have static dissipation additive that provide conductivity level greater than 50 picosiemens. Provide basket strainers upstream of the meter and some pump. Provide manual isolation valves to isolate the equipment for service. Provide thermal relief valves and around isolation check valves to relieve excessive pressure caused by thermal expansion of the liquid trap between the shutoff points. See figure 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Ground bonding reel. Provide integral part of the high-level shutoff system. Provide hydraulic shock surge suppressors if required. 423 tanker car loading system stations equipment required. Provide facility displacement turbine meter with each of the tank fill connection. Provide each man with the upstream backstream. Include temperature compensation for the racket zoom point with the custody transfer. Provide meter connection. Provide proving connection unless local provides an alternative that provide fuel sample connection to the collecting test sample. Provide pressure gauge on both sides of the strainer with a differential pressure type across the strainer. Provide fusible link with a butterfly isolation valve first piece of equipment in the direction of the flow of the loading position. Provide loading connection control valves, etc. on one or both sides of the loading platform specified by the owner. Load tanker cars from the bottom using counterbalance articulated tank car loading assembly. Provide electronic intrinsically safe with a portable liquid high level sensor for the adjustable height of each of the load rack. Provide overfill interlocking with a sensor for the electronic high level shutoff with ground verification control system. Provide electronic high level shutoff with electronic ground verification, electronic hydraulic dead man control system. System shall be intrinsically safe with a self checking with an interlocking system with either of these solenoid operated tanker car loading diaphragm control valve on the pump suction. The valve cannot remain open, but the pump cannot operate. If the tanker car is full, the tanker car is not grounded, or the 10 manners was released, provided with the capability to connect with the ground verification rack with the rail tanker car frame. Provide emergency fuel shutoff button, push station, fill stand with a multiple position emergency fuel shutoff push button station is required with the east position along with the routes of the parcel ingress between 100 to 200 feet from the fill stand, designed in such a manner with the activation of the emergency stop shut off of the fueling at the pump house and the pump pad. Provides solenoid operated tanker car loading diaphragm control valve opening, closing speed control, pressure regulating, checking the solenoid shut off features. Interlock the solenoid with electronic high level shut off of the ground verification control system. Okay, provide basket, strainer, upstream meters and pump. Provide manual isolation valve with the isolated equipment of the service. Provide thermal relief around the isolation trickle valve with the relieve excessive pressure caused by thermal expansion liquid trap between shutoff points of figure 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, and provide relaxation tank pipe configuration sufficient capacity to retain maximum flow of the loading station for 30 seconds for the time of the fuel leave. The last piece of filtration equipment from the fuel reaching the load nozzle applies only to the JP5 and the other fuels, which now have the sag dissipation additive that provides a conductivity level greater than 50 picosiemens. Provide the hydraulic shock surge suppressor if required. 5. Piping system. 5.1. Product segregation. Except the otherwise approved, the owner provides a separate receiving storage distribution system for each product, except as otherwise approved by the owner, preventing misfueling, transfer type of the fuel other than the type intended by using different size piping valves and adapters, nozzles, etc. Alright, 6. Equipment to description for the appropriate for the guide specification or same for the design provided with the specification and information of equipment selection to make the provision for the drain. Equipment for maintenance for the provide hard pipe drain with an equipment that holds more than 5 gallons of fuel when a pipe in which drains to the product recovery tank is within 12 feet of the equipment. Bulk air eliminators use flange connected steel body bulk air eliminators. Desired pressure flow rating and applicable service requirement include automatic air release head with the interlocking equipment with float and solenoid operated with a hydraulic operative diaphragm control valve with the provide discharge piping to conjunct with the recovery tank and the other safety main contaminants. 62 meters. Provide meters with a swivel mounted counter heads at the truck fill stands will accommodate varied trucking operating position. 62.1 meters positive displacement. Use flange connected cast steel body with positive displacement meter with appropriate pressure for the flow rating to meet with the applicable service requirement. Ensure the meter that has the drain gate and register provide with the meter with the temperature compensation adjustable calibration where there is custody transfer. Ensure meter crossing accessors are compatible with either the mechanical or electronic support equipment is selected. Provide an accuracy of plus or minus 0.5%, which may be used in custody transfer. Consult with the owner requirements for the meter to accommodate with the remote location or equipment through the use of card operated and key operated data acquisition systems. Alright, 622 turbines, meter turbines. The use of flange connected steel body turbine meters of the appropriate pressure for the flow rating meter, applicable service requirement to provide a flow strength before the turbine meter provide with the strength length of the pipe minimum of 10 pipe diameters upstream and the 5 pipe diameter downstream. All of the diameter meters required with the manufacturer. Show meter has case drain with the register provide meter with the temperature compensation adjust the calibration whether it is custody transfer provide accuracy plus or minus 0.5% when you use the custody transfer and show all supporting equipment and the meter is capability of the turbine selected. So for the owner requirements for the meter to be communicate with the remote location or equipment consider use of the card operator or key operated data acquisition system. 623 meter orifices. Use the type of the meter only with the custody transfer. The counting inventory control is not required. Provided with the flange connection. Provide a flow straighter than the orifice meter with the provided strength length of the pipe minimum 10 pipe diameters upstream, 5 pipes downstream. All orifice meters are required by the manufacturer. R36 pressure or pressure vacuum gauge. Use filled liquid filled gases on the range of the dial side that is necessary, but not less than 0 to 160 psi gauge pressure range. 4-inch dial diameter. Gauges shall be stainless steel with construction black graduations on a white face for extreme temperature environments. Consult with the owner of the direction possible. Use the air filled gauge for location for the temperature less than 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Use appropriate gauge liquid it will not freeze to prevent damage of the gauging. Consider location year-round weather conditions or the requirements for the type of liquid filling to be used. Gauge liquid service ranges are glycerin, silicone. Glycerin 0 to 400, silicone 40, negative 40 to 600. Provide a lever handle gauge cock with a pressure knob, each of the pressure gauge with an action provide indicating of the recording pressure gauges on suction, discharge line with the intermittent pipeline, pumping station, incoming line, delivery terminal, each such pipeline if required by owner. Pressure gauges should be installed so that they are testable without removing them from the pipe. 6.4 strainers, but require strainers to protect central fecal pump unless it precludes maybe net positive suction head of the pump, whether or not a strainer are installed with the suction side of the central fecal pump. Require a spool piece so that the temporary station can be installed during the startup of the system. Strainers are required on the suction side, all pump meters, and receipt filterization also. Use flange basket strainers constructed steel fitted with removed baskets, final mono metal stainless steel mesh, large mesh can reinforcement provide quick opening single screw type with the draining connection bottom. Alright, provide fine screen mesh as follows. Pumps in section 7 mesh at 108,000 inch. Pump section positive displacement 40 mesh at 16,000 inch. Receipt filterization 40 at 16,000 inch. Meter unless downstream filter separator 1600 of the CH and mesh is 40. In all cases, ensure effective screens are not less than 3 times the cross of the sectional cross area of the pipe. Provide pressure gauge on both sides of the strainer with the differential type gauge across the strainer. Alright, surge pressure. Every effort should be made with the control of the hydraulic surge shock with acceptable limits of the design piping system rather than use the surge pressure whether or not possible to come with extremely impractical surge suppressors may be incorporated. Use diaphragm bladder type equipped with the top mounted liquefied pressure gauge water first style check valve at the bottom of the drain above the check valve isolation valve. Provide a needle valve around the check valve to permit the control bleed black of the surge suppressor without rebounding, locating the surge suppressor as close as possible, point off the shut off expected to cause a shock. Some surge compressors can reduce the shock pressure, but it will eliminate it too entirely. For solution, hydraulic shock is conserving the piping design using loops and slow closing valves. Surge suppressors are strictly last resort solution and require approval of the owner prior to designing it in the system. Alright, 6.6 pumps. Design requirements. Design pumps deliver the full range operating conditions anticipated with any fuel rates required to ensure the pumps delivered sufficient head to overcome the friction static head loss of the system rated with the flow of the material, specifically gravity, temperature, viscosity, vapor pressure, corrosive, and solvent properties of the fuel. The range be given them with a specific gravity, etc. Use the large value of the proposed calculation for a single grade fuel contact pumps in parallel. Select according to the type of the most suitable for a particular application. Not have positive displacement. Replace a reciprocating pump. The product issue pipeline transfer, provide enough pumps to allow the system to operate at full capacity with the largest pump out of service. 6.2 central fecal pumps. The API standard 610 central fecal pumps to pump from the above ground tanks with continuous flooded sections. 6.6.3 vertical turbine pumps. The API standard 1610 vertical turbine pumps to pump the underground tanks. Not use horizontal transfer pumps to in a pit alongside the underground tank as an alternative. Alright, 6.6.4 rotary pumps. Using the sliding vane positive displacement pump with a self-priming with a central fecal pump, the application string line pipings, and then a similar strip with a pump that frequently loses prime. For these purposes, the provided pressure relief of the valve located with the discharge of the size of the pump, the variable speed motor can be used on positive displacement pumps, gradually bringing the pump to normal operating speed with no on positive displacement pump pressure relief valve shall be considered with a safety relief valve, not operating valve. The valves modulate with a normal basis of the maintain of such pressure. Using the relief valve to modulate with the pump discharge pressure voids of the pump warranty. 6.6.5 driver. Drive permanently installed with a pumped electrical motor, which is permanently properly closed in accordance with the National Fire Protection Association 70. Site drivers are not overloading at any point of the curve, provided anti-reversing ratchets on all vertical turbine motors. 6.6.6 materials of construction use carbon steel motor, ideal iron casting components. 6.6.7 installation. Most permanently installed pumps with substantial foundation reinforced concrete, so in accordance with the hydrostatic institution valve standards. Valve material construction general service require the valves to be hard carbon steel bodies except for the aviation turbine. See below. Valves are generally stricter and may be internal nickel plate with internal epoxy coated. Do not allow valves to with aluminum cast iron brown material. Use only API fire safe valves. Alright, 672, the material of the construction aviation turbine fuel surface valve with the mating kind of the aviation turbine shall be either stainless steel with a chrome plated carbon nickel, carbon steel electrode less nickel plated carbon steel. Do not allow zinc coated copper bearing materials in contact with the fuel. Do not allow internal epoxy coated valves. Require manual valves of the aviation turbine fuel system. The stainless steel bodies of the bonnets and carbon steel body valves are permitted to provide internal place of the nickel plating. Do not allow aluminum, casting, iron, bronze body valves. Use only API fire safe valves. Alright, 673 isolation valve, double block and bleed isolation. Even the separation product service of the tank shell connection. Piping goes below the ground, above and below ground, between pier and tank storage. Other location critical to pressure testing piping. Plug valves, double block and bleed. You with the double C with the tape with the lifted locking plug type valve with the body of the bleed. Between the C with the double block and bleed, the valve shall be designed so that the synthetic seating material is burned out when the fire with the metal seat with the remaining of the effective closure with the comply with the API standard 607. Lubricated plug valves are not allowed, and to include the integral body cavity thermal relief valve, ball valve, double block and bleed. When double C with the trunnion mount with lockable the ball type valve with the body bled between the C with the double block and bleed. There will be very rarely use an acceptable alternative to double block and bleed plug valves. The application where the valve is operated very infrequently. Example, the isolation valve pits where they only close when performing pressure testing of the piping. Valves should be designed so that the synthetic seating of the materials burned out on fire metal to metal seat will remain. Effective closure comply with the API standard 607 integral body cavity thermal relief valve. Alright, gate valve, double block and bleed, double seated with the lockable gate valve with the on-body bleed between seats with the double block and bleed. They will be very usually used acceptable alternative double block and bleed, plug valve, double block and bleed, ball valves. Only other double block and bleed valves will not physically fit. Valves shall be designed so that the synthetic seating material is burned out in a fire. Metal to metal seat will remain effective closure to comply with the API 607. Single-seated gate valves are not allowed. Integral body with a cavity thermal relief valve. Alright, quick opening, frequent opening, isolation valves. Usually the less critical application, double block and bleed shut is required. Ball valve, ball type, lockable valve, design synthetic seating. Material burned out in fire, metal to metal seat will remain effective closure compliant with API standard 607. Use Teflon Viton synthetic seating materials with full port ball valves. While line pigging is required within 10 pipe diameters upstream, 5 pipe diameters downstream of the flow with a pressure control valve flow sensing device such as a venturi valve shall we comply with the API standard 608. Butterfly valves. High performance water treating and butterfly type of the valves designed so that the synthetic seating materials burned out in fire metal to metal seat will remain in effect and closure comply with the API standard 607. The Teflon with the synthetic seal seating material of the valve with a high performance type with the eccentric disc shape shaft with a clamping action bubble tight shut off provided only with the inlet of the tank truck. The fuel stand supplied with a return riser. Aircraft direct fuel station fusible link released at 165 degrees Fahrenheit. These valves are not required to be permitted on Air Force projects. Use full port valves except for the same diameter of the pipe when line pigging is required. Isolation valve operators manually operate valves do not specify with the remote automatic emergency operation. Use gear to operate a double block and bleed plug valves larger than 6 inches. Double block and bleed gate ball and double block and bleed valves specified with the remote automatic emergency service may have electrical motors operated. If operated, the owner provided locking stable time tabs isolating to allow the padlock to use the lockout of the valve during maintenance. For chain operators on the valves located within 72 inches or higher above the grade. Alright, 675 isolation valve connection location. Provide isolation valve with the piping for the control valve with the permit the isolation. Equip with the maintenance of the repair. Provide additional valve location necessary to conduct the valid hydrostatic test required with the manually operated valve except for the motor operator, especially specifically authorized applicable standard drawings and technical specifications. Use double block and bleed type isolation valves for separation products. Serve the tank shell connections above ground storage tanks of over 12,000 gallons. Only when piping goes above and below ground beer in tanker storage. Other location critical periodic pressure testing of the piping. Quick opening, frequent opening test isolations may be used for less critical application. The double block and bleed shutoff is not required as a minimum requirement. Provide isolation in following locations. Piping goes underground, comes above ground, requires periodic pressure testing. All subsurface above ground. On piping connection, storage tank, on branch line piping connection, main product pipeline header, on product pipeline header just before the leave the pump station. On the suction side, discharge sides of each of the pumps unit, each of the suction side vertical central fuel pump instead of underground tanks. Upstream, downstream side of each of the blinding connections across the country pipeline. On the inlet outlet connection, each drain and filter separately removed the diaphragm control valve with the other equipment that requires periodic servicing on the inlet valve. The outlet valve may be used to isolate with more than one piece of adjacent equipment that is controlled and acting in accessories. And each main distribution system immediately downstream the branch connection with the existing future operation facility with the serve of the pipeline of the other piping at each of the tanker truck offloading connection of each of the inlet gravity top tank on above ground piping in each of the tanker car, tanker truck loading connection, critical roadway, runway, taxiway, crossing, consider isolation valves on both sides of the runway, taxiway, facilitate hydrostatic isolation. Alright, 676 isolation valve pits provide fiberglass control pits with a rolling hinge cover for all isolation visualizations. Installed in the non-traffic area with underground fuel system design valve pits and valve operators so the valves can be operated with personnel without confined space entry. Alright, 6-8 other valves except for the diaphragm control valves. Check valves prevent backflow from the pumps. Checking with the line meters of the other location running back and reverse flow that must be avoided. Check. Valves may be swing disc, global, the dual-plated hinge discs, and bring loaded pop at the ball diaphragm, like actuated type. Check soft seat, the non-slamming type of the renewable seat in the disc. Check valve conforms to the API standard 6D. Use the non-surge check valve, diaphragm control valve, flow control, time feature discharge, all pumps. Using the non-surge check diaphragm control valve, pump discharge, consider the use of the spring type of water for wafer check before the diaphragm valve to prevent sudden flow reversal during the shutdown passing through the system before the diaphragm control valve diaphragm chamber is filled. Closing the valve. Alright, 682 thermal relief. Provide thermal relief valves around isolation. Check with the valves to relieve excessive pressure that caused by thermal expansion. Liquid trapped between shaft points. See figure 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Or your diaphragm control valves, hydraulically operated single-seated global type. The diaphragm actuated control valve with extensively and fueling system control valves. These valves consist of the main valve pilot control system. The main valve consists of the body diaphragm cover and operated by a manometer pressure above the diaphragm. Since the chamber above the diaphragm exposed to the greater area of the diaphragm chamber processor, then the area of the disc exposed to the line of pressure, the equal pressure for the chamber of the pipeline results. Greater force has been applied to the top of the disc. The force of the disc against the seat, closing the valve by selecting proper pilot control system. These valves can be used in numerous ways to control flow and pressure level of the fueling system. Open and close operation. Most basic function, hydraulically operated diaphragm control valves. Operation accomplished applying pressure above the diaphragm to close the valve, relief the pressure to lower the blinded pressure to open the valve with the pilot trim. The use to perform the operation three-way valve, which is controlled by a solenoid, hand pressure, differential, or a float. 692 throttling operation. There's other main method of the controlling of the hydraulically operated diaphragm control valve, and in the case of the valve modulates them with the degree opening response change with the throttling of the control. The throttling control reacts to the pressure differential cross main valve with the pressure for the differential cross orifice plate with the regulate with the position of the disc of the main valve. For the proper operation, these valves shall be installed with a straight pipe on the both sides of the valve with a type 10 pipe diameters upstream side, 5 diameters over the downstream side. Sufficient to provide full port manual isolation valve with as air placed in within limits. Alright, 693, the check valve function. The unique function with the control valve is the case of the main valve outlet pressure connected with the diaphragm cover. Therefore, the downstream out pressure exceeds the inlet pressure, which normally holds the valve open and the valve closed, preventing backflow. Note that in order for the valve to close, they must backflow, sometimes with a substantial amount of time. Consider putting a regular check valve in the interior of the valve in cases with a concern. 9.4 remote operation. Hydraulically operated diaphragm control valves can be opened remotely, accomplishing the installing of the tubing with a point pressure setting of the valve with using remote controlled solenoids within the trim. R695 materials of construction using stainless steel pilot control valve with a stainless steel tubing body bonded covers with a stainless steel internal plated steel, internally plated nickel nodular iron provide Viton Bunin diaphragm disc rings enclosure all electrical apparatus according to classification of the area in which they are installed provide means of the wire sealable all position adjustable pilots. Now use aluminum valve 696. For fueling system, hydraulically operated diaphragm control valve following prudencies refer to specific chapters of the application. Water slug shut-off, rate of flow control, pressure reduction, pressure relief, liquid level control, non-surge check control, dead man control, electrical block control. 697, the combination of these controls are also possible. Typically, use these controls filter separated the water slug shut-off with the rate of flow control. 610 thermometers provide thermometers of burn fuel number 5 and 6 of the distribution piping system. Each load receiving point on the inlet and outlet of each for the heater fuel hose. The use side of the required with the turbine design flow rate. The use of the house, flange, nipples, and carbon steel brass, except for the aviation turbine fuels. The issue points use brass, stainless steel, aluminum, where metal bars contact the fuel. 611.1 loading fuel hoses provide pressure loading hoses in connection to comply with the EI standard 1529. Offloading fuel hose provide lightweight, flexible, non-pressure offloading hose constructed nitrile, Robert, rigid poly, vinyl control, chloride, pexil, synthetic braiding, smooth bore corrugated outer diameter, but not pressurized hose, 65 psi at rating at 72 degrees Fahrenheit or 27 HGs vacuum rating. R7 control design requirements. Automatic controls are any facility that may include the temperature, pressure, fuel level, the pump control of the automatic flow controls, arms, alarm, line switches, motor operated isolation valve, solenoid pointed actuated diaphragm control, remote spin, some condition indication, other form of automatic controls, or remote meter indication, electronic access control, data logging application with meter techniques, basis selection, added violence, automation, telemetry system study, particular application consideration possible, economic justification, operational security requirement. Alright, 72 flow control, where the possible to achieve flow rates exceed the equivalent rating with the provided adjustable flow control rate with the outlet connection. Each pipe meter filter separated the diaphragm control rate, control pressure of the differential curve of the orifice venturi of the main line necessary to provide with the remote operated valve storage tank, inlet and outlet line, suction, discharge, transfer pump, transfer lines, fuel pyres, other than location. Pump controls. All other operational pump suction discharge valve that may be part of the automatic sequence starting with a central vehicle pump with the shutting down remotely, locally, or on a protective shutdown device. Remotely operated valves on the discharge side of the pump may either motor operated solenoid pilot type of the hydraulic operated diaphragm control valve. Remote control valves on the suction side of the pump can be motor operated valves only. Equip the valves on the green and red open closed or indicating lights push button control location. Consider the using PLCs, a more complicated system. R731, all pumps provide the following criteria. Key-handed auto button, each pump with a key-hand off switch at the motor start with each of the remotely operated pumps and both devices use the same key. Indicator light control station pins of the indication both of the pump and operating with a non-energized push to test type. Single light alarm to indicate pump failure. The pump is controlled automatically. Reduced voltage starting required electrical utility supplier in all cases of the pump motor greater than 50 horsepower. All vertical pumps. Emergency fuel shut-off push buttons between 120 feet from the pump with expected ingress, egress direction. Maintain contacts provided emergency fuel shut-off push buttons at the point of the fuel delivery receipts, fuel stand period tanks, and using sample spacing location requirements. 732 multifunctional pump. Multifunctional pumps typically use a small facility design and range to perform the different functions of the fuel loading, offloading, transfer, depending on how the valves align. Provide each function for the control system requirement. Each function described elsewhere in this chapter. Each of the multitask pump provide a manual selector for switch choose a set of control setup of the pump that look at performing a particular function. 733 transfer pump. Transfer pumps used to supply of the tank fuel of the tank truck loading facility, the tanker car loading facility, transfer fuel one place installation to another bulk storage tank facility, operated storage tank to provide transfer pumps exceeding 150 horsepower, push button start stop stations where the pumps are used for the truck car loading, provide push button control adjacent to the pump. Each of the loading station problematic logic controls where multiple pumps supply headers loading multiple trucks, cars to obtain the desired flow rate at each loading station. 734 pipeline pumps. The pumps over 150 horsepower provide protective shutdown device alarm with essential services control station event of the following. High pump case temperature view of the block discharge except for the dump pump vibration mechanical seal of the packaging gland fair the high discharge pressure loss of the discharge pressure except for the motor vibration high motor winding temperature electronic interlocks provided ending starting of the pump that contain the valve highlighting are not correct, which are cause the pump shut down if the key valve is changed, loss of pump suction pressure, high bearing temperature, loss of cooling water flow. Or 735, temperature control. Provide temperature control for the all fuel, air, oil filters on outer fuel outlet oil temperature safe limits. Provide sensing element for the fuel outlet line. Activate the thermostatic valve of the heating of the medium supply with connection to the heater. Self-actuating control valve required with no external power from the closure. Usually manually adjust the set point with the temperature variable for the over the desired temperature range. Provide a bypass around with the control valve with a V port globe and a valve with the manual operated. 736 key cards and locks give the possible economical operation advantage of the electronic key card system, which permits 24-hour unmanned operation. The types of the system compromised card key ride. Volt reader is located near the surface pump. The reader is activated with the card and key accumulates issued with the customer data, which is downloaded to the central computer on a periodic basis. 8 canopies. Our canopies protect the fixed assets for the extreme weather unless otherwise the owner by the owner provide a canopy to protect fixed facility assets, operators, equipment in extreme weather conditions, recurring sustained extreme ice and desert-like conditions. Fixed facilities equipment include a limited to pump pad, filterization pad, meter pad, isolation valve pad, tanker truck, tanker car, offloading, loading equipment pads, control panels, electronic panels, motor control centers. Canopies to reduce the storm weather do not provide a canopy to include the rain reaching contaminated air unless it's required by the federal, state, local regulation. If it's economically justified, reducing side of the concrete remote spill contaminant spill treatment system with the direction of the owner. Canopy with a tank truck with a tank car loading, offloading equipment containment area. Ensure the underside with the canopy is high enough to provide operator headroom for the walking on the top of the truck. 9. Product recovery systems. Product recovery systems collect with the storable usable aviation turbine fuel will otherwise become waste for the operational maintenance activity. Store the product recovery system for the other products. 10. Fuel additives directed for the owner. Product bulk storage with the storage aviation turbines. The equipment to inject fuel additives require proportional injector storage activity. Additives capability recirculating the tanks, piping the injectors if the additive of the corrosion. Characteristic construct of the system include the storage tank, the tank appurtenancies, the pumps, and if required, piping and associated fittings and valves or injectors, assembly stainless steel components. Alright, we'll back out of this. Integral valve, thermal relief piping, double block and bleed at the top, thermal body relief, the manual drain, your welded flange product through the system, thermal piping relief, differential pressure relief down towards from tanks, manual drain line, conventional thermal relief, union thermal relief pressure gauge, 2 system product flow, pipe support lines, equipment slab, curb, strainer, valve, ball valve, threaded outlets, welded neck and flange. X flange inside seal insulation flange. Check valve plug with high valve from the tank of the offloading refueler lines to the fuel storage tank. The integral thermal piping system from fuel storage tank to fuel storage tank from incoming pipeline control valve deaerator. Check valve, pump house, ball valve, conventional thermal relief control valve, integral valve, thermal relieving pipe system, filter, separate plug valve, typical from pipe house. Storage tank, conventional thermal relief piping system, tank fuel line, tank suction line, pump, plug, fill, typical storage tank, integral valve, thermal relief piping system. A canopy over the provided canopy entire compartment directed tank truck receiving and then tanker car receiving show the rail tanker containment area because bill containment is slumped. The rail tanker car, the fuel pipeline, loading equipment and offloading equipment and canopy over the equipment. Drop off loading system show the tanker or tanker car cavity gravity drop hose, spill, contaminated collar, underground double wall, fuel storage tank, drop tank, turbine enclosure, submersible pump, confinement, piping, isolation valve, combination check, high level shutoff valve and tank. Drop off valve, tank valve, combination high level shutoff valve, isolation valve, submersible, vertical turbine, above ground fuel tank, storage spill, contaminated collar, gravity drop hose, tanker truck or tanker car. Or you have your fuel storage, metering, piping connection, ball valve, air eliminator, ball valve, sight and flow indicator, loading hose, quickness and coupling, hang on rack, hose and connection, hose handling rack, and stainless steel rooms. Flow control valve, positive displacement meter, pressure gauge, vertical line, and paddle type floor switch, pressure and vacuum, vent line, extension with a higher than tank truck with a tanker car, sensitive line switch, basket strain with a drain, unloading hose, manifold, the hose exceeding 23 1/4 inch above finished grain, package offloading system. Loading system shows the fusible link solved with a surge pressure strain with a double block and bleed valve isolation, control valve flow stringer meter, the grounding verification, overall protection, dead man control, locking arm with loading nozzle, ground wheel, and card reader. Direct offloading hose with offloading nozzle, corrugated house, stretch, ground reader, card reader, ground housing, verification check, valve offloading, central figure with the aerator, control valve, flow steering, straightener valve, fusible link with a valve does not require on Air Force projects, double bleed, block and valve isolation, meter proving connections. And then it goes into the test, and this was a copy of the introduction of petroleum fuel facilities bulk fuel storages on the PDH website.